Hello everyone and welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up the database component of your Designer applications. Input and output fields of a web application can be saved into the database by defining them in the Database Designer. We begin by pressing the databases icon to go to the page where we're going to be creating and configuring save fields. In all applications, the first table we create is going to be considered the primary table. We begin by pressing Add New. Giving it a name, we get our first database table. An application can have one primary table and any number of secondary tables. Using only a primary table should be enough for most applications. However, you must consider using secondary tables if you have a complicated data model. For instance, capturing the number of subscribers for 10 years per state will require a relatively large grid with several inputs. In this case, it's going to be easier for the database to handle this structure and move this data into a secondary table. Instead of assigning a column to each input, we're going to be able to establish a one-to-one or one-to-many relationship between the primary table and the secondary tables. But more on this later. We can edit existing database tables by pressing their icon. When we go into the primary table, we're going to see a set of system-generated fields already added into the database table. These are the fields the system automatically creates for each application, and these cannot be removed. You can choose to create a database before or after creating the web UI. If you choose to leave the database for later, it's going to be a bit easier to add the save fields using the Add Use Columns button. This action will take you through all the fields that were used in the User Interface Designer. Alternatively, you can use the Add button to add individual fields. The system will show us the first field coming from our user interface. Here we can see the associated name range for this field. The next option here is the data type. We can choose from Boolean, integer, decimal, string, file, and datetime. Most of these options will be detected automatically by the system. However, if you'd like to change the data type to be saved in the database, you can change it from this menu. The next field is the column name. This determines what this field is going to be called in the database. It is typically a good idea to assign an informative name so that you're going to be able to make sense of the data export. We can set a maximum length for this database field from the maximum length option. The default is 255 characters. You can remove this field to allow any number of characters. Pressing Next will allow us to move on with the next save field. Once we're done, we can see the new fields added into the database table. We can go to the Edit button to make any changes to any of these fields. The Delete button will remove the selected field from the database. Once we're done with this table, we can simply click the Designer button to go back to the main page. We're going to be able to see our primary table added into the databases. We can add secondary tables into a database by pressing the Add New button. We're going to need to choose from the two options, a one-to-one table or a one-to-many table. One-to-one tables are used to simply separate data fields into different tables. This can be useful for keeping different data in different tabs or avoiding the 1024 column limit SQL impose. One-to-many tables work a bit differently. Here, we can establish a relationship between the primary table and the one-to-many table in a way that multiple rows in the secondary table will correspond to a single row in the primary table. One-to-many tables are useful for keeping data structured as a grid or list. Once we make a selection, we're then going to need to select the name range the secondary table will be based upon. Make sure that it has header information boxes enabled if your name range contains headers. Same as before, we need to assign names and select the data types for each column the secondary table will govern.